Hi, welcome back to the podcast School of Love, where we want to help you create parent child relationships where you can talk about anything, especially about sex. Sometimes you got to talk about other things too, right? Today, the topic is what is true modesty? And with fashion changing rapidly, I don't know, every month, I have no idea, but it's changing a lot. And sometimes this conversation also is part of our family's conversation. So today I invited Kristen Miele back. Number one, because she's super cool. Number two, because I really admire her biblical views and research and perspective of how God feels about sex. And it's just really fun to talk with her. So today we talk about what is true modesty, really from a biblical perspective. I really hope this helps you navigate this conversation in your home. We also talk about, okay, what does modesty mean for the female side and also for the male side? It was a really great conversation. And I hope you find something that helps you with this conversation in your home. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast School of Love. Here I am with Kristen Miele once again. Thank you so much for coming. And yeah, we did a podcast a while back on, a lot of what Kristen does, which is teaching kids about sex education from a Christian's perspective. And she's the founder of Sex Ed Reclaimed. And yeah, so thanks for coming. And we also had technical glitches, so thanks for meeting up once again and taking the time.
Yes, thank you, Amelia. I appreciate it. I've been traveling, and so it's great to actually have a set time where there's not going to be Wi-Fi problems, hopefully. And by the way, you're like one of the only people who says my last name correctly, and I think it's because of your time in Europe. You're just with more languages, you're just better at knowing how to pronounce that. So good on you.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know. Miele, it does rhyme with some other words I know, so maybe that's the trick.
Maybe.
Yeah. So today we wanted to talk about what is true modesty. And yeah, do you mind defining that for us? Modesty, like how do you see it?
Yeah, that's a really good question and a good starting point. I think even within my curriculum for kids, you briefly mentioned that. I really like at looking at definitions first to make sure everybody is on the same page. So in my curriculum for kids, I look at the internet definition of modesty or the dictionary, if you will, and that is it's being unassuming. What I found is that it said it was being unassuming or moderate about your abilities, which sound very similar to humility and the concept of humility to me. But in the Bible, interestingly, modesty does not always refer to the length of a skirt or how high the shirt is or what your swimsuit is like, of course. Modesty actually usually relates to not flaunting your talents, your giftings, your wealth in particular. Um, it can be your beauty. Some scriptures do talk about that. And instead, embracing more of a Christ like character who was very modest. So, in other words, modesty isn't just clothes, it really is like a way of life and a heart attitude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point to remember. Because showing off, generally we know it's not a nice thing. Like I know my kids, get annoyed if a kid in class is showing off, generally with anything. Um, but yeah, that's really interesting that there is no specific um, measurements or dress code in the Bible that's mentioned. But would you say it's still an important topic?
Yeah, I really like your mention just now of your kid's annoyance at the other child in their classroom because there is something innate about knowing and meeting uh, Christ-like virtues in your life or understanding Christ-like virtues and knowing God. There's something like we're all desiring for, we're all seeking to fill that hole. And even in that, it's like there's something we recognize immediately as a young person for the rest of our life about somebody who's showing off, just how frustrating it is and how it's not normal in the way that it's good, I guess. It is very normal, it's very typical behavior, but and we're all prone to it, but it's not like healthy or helpful to others. And That is, I think, pointing us to, okay, well, why is that? And ultimately, it's because that's not how our God is. That's not how our Maker is. That's not how He wants us to live. So, really appreciate that you pointed out that simple reference or example from your life. Um, I do think that modesty does refer to clothing. I don't think we can just throw that out completely, but the fact that many of us parents grew up with this idea that skirts had to be to the bottom of your middle finger or that a shirt had to cover up to your collarbone or that we needed to wear turtlenecks. I mean, that is really important in many religions. Like we see that in many cultures of the world today. And there's an aspect of modesty very clearly about that, but true Christ-like modesty is not just about the clothing because none of our behavior is just about the outward thing. Like the Bible is very clear over and over that it is not only outward appearance, but rather it is what's in the heart, and whatever is in the heart will come out. And it is very natural for us to want attention, just like that, annoying kid in your child's class. But we tend to find easy ways to do that, whether that's acting really crazy and really funny or wearing certain clothing that we know will draw the eye. And so I think it's a balance, and clothing is important, but it's not the only thing in regards to modesty.
Yeah. I like what you mentioned. And then also, because kind of going back, I mean, it seems like a really fine line of being like showing off, but then also being proud of yourself. Because sometimes I think some kids, also my kids, they can be proud of themselves on a certain aspect, but for someone else, it might sound like showing off.
Mm.
So, I mean, I guess it's this whole just chemistry of where everyone's at. Like some people, it's quite obvious they need the attention, they want the attention. Other people, uh, they recognize, oh, I did that well, and they share it, sincerely with someone. But if someone else feels maybe like, oh, I'm not doing so well, and he is, it feels then like the other is showing off. So I feel like it's complicated. What do you think?
I agree. I think most behaviors are. It's so easy to just look at a behavior, or in this situation, in this scenario that we're talking about, look at somebody and say, this is what they're doing, right? But everybody is different. And that's where the Holy Spirit and discernment from a spiritual aspect, wisdom come in, right? Because, for example, I think about the topics I talk about. One of the more difficult ones is abortion. Well, abortion, it's kind of easy for the Christian population to look at that and say, that is taking of a life. Therefore, it is wrong. God created life. You should never participate in that. You should never support that. Period. End of story. But I'm really interested in the conversation of, but why do people get abortions? Like, what are the drivers that get them to that place where they're making this decision that Christians don't want them to make? What happened to get to that point? And how can we fix, from a public health perspective, how can we fix broken systems that lead to people there? But from a behavioral perspective and a spiritual perspective, what in their life has emotionally, mentally, and spiritually gotten them to this part, right? To this part where they're making this huge decision. And so I'm always curious as to the why of somebody's behavior. In my curriculum, I talk to kids about, why do I like attention? Because we're hardwired to want attention, and we look for it in many wrong places or in unhealthy ways. It's natural to do in our sinful state, but if kids can really start to step back, especially as they get a little bit older and are able to be more introspective and think, why am I doing what I'm doing? Like, what am I really trying to get at? And am I just wanting to be loved, actually? And I don't feel that. Am I wanting to be liked by these people, and why? Am I wanting attention from guys, from girls? Why? Like, there's this dual, I guess, this tandem um, way I go into that conversation, which is that's natural and normal, but also let's figure out for you why you're doing this, like for you specifically. And that's where your question about, well, it's different for each kid, or how do you kind of figure this out? It looks different for different people. I agree with, because I think most behaviors are different for different people, even though we can still normalize the actual behavior itself because it is normal. Um, it's important to think about and have those kids consider why. Like, why are you doing what you're doing? And is there a better way to do it? Or is there a more Christ-like way even? How can we pray about this? How can we discuss this?
Mm-hmm. It always involves discernment, reflection, finding the why behind the behavior. Yeah, but important for any issue. Yeah. So sometimes this conversation, kind of in a family, really addressing modesty as a way of clothing. How do you start that conversation? Because, like you said, like the Bible doesn't give us dress codes, but it's also just important to address the fact that, yeah, we shouldn't run around with nothing on or almost nothing. Yeah, so how would you start that conversation as a
Right.
family?
I feel like that's a really good book title, Amelia. I want to steal it. The Bible doesn't give us dress codes. Like, I want to remember that, literally writing it down.
Nice.
We'll have to give you credit. So I think this is something where, again, we have to recognize the reality of it. Clothing is an important part of how we present ourselves and how we operate in the world. And even as I briefly mentioned earlier, different cultures wear different things based on their culture and their religion. And even in, not to get off topic, but I have a video for kids on masculinity and femininity. What does it mean to be feminine or masculine? What is actually biblical, but what's cultural? Because there's a lot that's cultural and people mistake it for wherever you're growing up and living. And I discuss how for many years, let's say in Europe, in European countries, it's fairly common for men to wear almost like a fanny pack or a purse, right? Like a little bag as they go from thing to thing. But in the States, that is viewed as or was viewed as very feminine and very girly. Why would you ever do that as a guy? Like you have a briefcase and that's it. Now it's not really like that anymore. But that is one example of it's not biblical to do this or do that. We don't need to shame or judge people who do that because that has nothing to do with Christ-like standards. It's just a cultural expectation and a stereotype. Um, when in reality, people carry bags because they can carry their stuff in them. So I think there's a practical application with modesty and our kids. Now, I have a friend who is my age. She was telling me that when she used to buy bathing suits, she had two sisters. Her mom would ask her to walk in front of her dad to like come downstairs and show her dad as a barometer, as a gauge of is this appropriate or not. And I just, she was telling this to a few friends, and we were all just like, that is not okay. There's something very inherently odd about that. Like, we get why she did it, but it's also, you're going in front of your dad and basically saying, is this showing too much skin? It's just kind of, it's odd and there could be a lot of layers there that really stick with you for years in terms of male approval and into dating relationships and marriage and that kind of thing. So there's it's like we know it when we hear it. That's like, that's a weird barometer, right? The finger to measure how long your skirt is, like if it's touching the end of your finger or not. It's just kind of odd. And there's not a biblical reality to that. But the truth in that is that wearing clothes that do cover your body, especially private parts, as I would say with little kids, but especially your genitalia, is necessary for day-to-day life and good for you. Like it's safe for you. Um, I agree that it's a fine line between um, even the idea of how do you talk about this, but not blame people, because I don't want it to become a thing where, well, what was she wearing? How was she dressed? Right. And that's
Mm.
a victim blaming way of saying, well, she deserved whatever she got or he deserved. Usually, though, it's in the context of women, because that's just so not true. Things happen no matter what people are wearing, and it doesn't have to do directly with what they're wearing. And yet, at the same time, how we present ourselves to the world matters. And it matters for our legacy and for how we model Christ if we're in Christ. And so I think if we make it a little bit bigger than just, hey, this is covering private parts, that's what we do. You need to be careful because of men or women objectifying you. No, men and women are going to objectify you no matter what, actually. That's just going to happen in reality. And that has a lot to do with them, way more with them than it does with you. But what do you want? How do you want to live? What do you want your legacy to be, your life to look like? If you want people to remember you for your beauty and your beauty alone, then you're probably going to act like that. I can certainly remember, who can't remember people from university or from school who that was their whole thing, was how they dressed and how they appeared to others was the most important thing to them. Um, and you know that there's more to life than that. So I think modesty with clothing can get more deeply once again at heart issues, which is really what the Bible wants us to do. It wants us to look at that and present that to the Lord as a sacrifice and say, hey, Lord, like, what am I doing here that's um, maybe has sin attached to it, pride, etc. And that's really what I want to get at with kids, far more than any sort of specifics and legalities about what clothing they wear.
It makes me think of, like, I haven't read the book yet, full transparency, but I really want to read Return to Modesty by Wendy Shalit.
Mm,
And I think this is really, I mean, I asked a little bit, looked online what it's about. It's really sharing character and personality over any body parts. Like you said, it's more about who I am instead of what I look like. Because, okay, I mean, in some ways, I think we should honor our bodies and take care of them. You know, we do want to look good. That's a good thing, but it shouldn't be like the subject thing, especially because how we look, it's changing all the time. I think we should also always love ourselves, no matter, if we are having a bad hair day or we're getting old or whatever. But yeah, if we just make it the main thing, I feel like, I don't know, it'll hold us back in some ways.
yeah. Well, it's like it becomes an idol, right? Like, let's say you do dress
Mm,
extremely modest in the more older term, or older version of that term. Like, you're extremely covered all the time. That could be something for Christians, at least, where it's like, well, I do this, so therefore I get this. And that's not how Christianity is. It's one of the only, it is the only faith that says, hey, you can't do things to get to God. You are not enough. You never will be, for God, because God demands perfection because he's a perfect God. But actually, he loves you so much that he gave you a perfect sacrifice. If you accept him as savior, you live in communion with him. You live with God eternally, now and forever. And Christianity is the only faith like that. And so modesty can be a form of idolatry, really, and a way to get things and get to a certain level of holiness or God, which it's not. It's not. It's an outpouring, again, of who you worship, but it doesn't get you closer to the one you worship just simply by doing that. Um, so I think it can become very legalistic, as we saw rampantly for the 90s and early 2000s, and probably still today, really.
yeah, that's true. And so, I mean, also it's an interesting, if you get into women versus men in this
Mm.
topic, how do you see that in the masculine area? Because it feels just so much more of a topic for women. Um, and if it even hits men at all, I feel, I don't know, it's a really different way.
Hmm.
um, yeah.
Yeah, I think when you first asked that, I immediately think of social media. There's so many men on social media, and I mean in life, but on socials I'm thinking about specifically, who are extremely immodest um, in the way they live their life. They're boastful about their talents and abilities. That's what they live for. They're showing off their body, they're showing off their watches and their shoes, and they're like, it's not just this fun hobby thing for them they enjoy, they celebrate. It's who they are, it's their identity and their personality, and that is immodest. On many levels of not just clothing, but all sorts of things. So I think about like influencer culture and fitness culture for men. My husband, loves watching bodybuilding tournaments. He's just amazed at how much men can like utilize their bodies to show strength. And there's actually a huge competition that comes to the States where I live, in Columbus, Ohio. And it's crazy, people watching experience, but it is a lot of very immodest people, women and men. The whole point is to show off your body and how strong you are. Um, and it's like, okay, there's probably a godly way to do that. And I think that there are some Christians involved in that um, style of living or job, even professionally. But there's pretty clearly a way to do that not Christ-like, and it's when it becomes your whole identity, your whole thing. And men do it, I think, just as often as women, but for too long we've probably considered modesty with women. And I will say my caveat with this biblically is that I pulled up some scriptures like First Timothy 2, 9 through 10. And I don't know if you want to put that in the notes or something, but Paul, I mean, it does seem that he's encouraging women to dress modestly and focusing on their deeds as well over external adornments. And then in First Peter, this isn't just towards women, but he is emphasizing kind of inner beauty and a gentle spirit over your outward appearance. Certainly, there's also verses like Matthew 6, which says, "Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them." So that even could relate to modesty in 6 1.
Mhm.
Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. Go pray in secret. Don't be like the Pharisees, basically, who pray and show off. Um, so modesty in that sense relates to a lot of parts of the body. And it is external dress, but it's other parts of your life as we've discussed too. So,
Mhm.
but I agree. I think it's
Yeah.
harder for women. I think women almost feel more burdened for that. And I think some of that, not to get too deep, like this could be a whole other podcast, but really has to do with objectification and pornography use and um, women being subservient, this idea that women are subservient always to the male gaze. Like if you've ever heard that phrase, the male gaze, like we are subjected to whatever they're doing to us in their mind. And that just women don't do that as often as men do. Um, Women are not quite wired that way. Even though we definitely do. We definitely do objectify men in our minds and in our lives. But I do think the burden is almost more on women, unfairly so, like as a part of the fallen world, um, because we're more objectified easily, which stinks.
Mhm.
It's really difficult and really sad. It's broken.
I agree. And reminded me of an experience I had in an Asian country. My sister and I, we were there with our families. She was there with her partner, and so it was just a river, and we were wearing bathing suits, basically all of us. And it was right next to a restaurant. And then someone came down to talk to us from the restaurant, and um, this person was so nervous. His English wasn't so good. And then he was like showing me on Google Translate, like, please cover up. And then we were like, what? Why? Like, we're just swimming and we're wearing normal bathing suits. And then we wanted to know the details, like, okay, what about like our guys? Are they okay? And they're
Right.
like, no, no, that's fine. They
Uh,
can stay in their bathing suits. And we're like, and the kids, because I have my kids with me. Yeah, the
sure.
kids are fine. Just you and your and your sister. And so it was just like, aha, okay. And yeah, it's just like you said, it's just this objectification of women and how they see you. It's like, okay, it's just so interesting, right? We were all there,
Mm.
everyone pretty much almost equally showing equal amount of skin, maybe
Uh,
the boys even more.
right.
But yeah, it was really like, okay, but the women are inappropriate because that
Mm.
is,
Just
yeah, I don't know,
inherently,
somehow
just because you
sexual or
basically because
something.
you exist. Yeah, even though, like you said, your husband was showing more skin, but just because you exist as a woman in that space, you were immodest or inappropriate. And that is really difficult because even as you're mentioning Asian country, you're in a different culture, there's different expectations. And so you want to like honor other people in that, but there's a part of you that just feels sadness at that almost. Like, why just
Hmm.
me? What did I do? You
Right.
didn't do anything wrong. You're existing. So it's sad. It is a broken system, and I think we can grieve that even like even be angry about that while still honoring that person or covering up more.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah.
And this happens, I see it
Yeah.
in Christian camps all the time. I was just talking, you mentioned your sister. I was just talking to my sister recently about, how her camp for her kids, boys, they can do whatever. They don't have to wear t-shirts while they swim. Girls, girls have to wear a certain kind of swimsuit at this camp. And it's like, well, is that wrong? I mean, no, like things can have dress codes, like organizations can have dress codes, schools can have dress codes, but how much more? it is for women, even at a little age. I mean, my niece was like 9 at this time. It's like, really? Why would she need? She is not. Who is sexualizing her? Who is objectifying her? What is the deal? But it's been long a part of many cultures is uh, and our history as Christians too. Like she needs to cover up, but not my nephew. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I see modesty, it really falls under so many headlines. Like, in some ways, it's a good thing. We want to be protective and not flaunting, not exposing or showing off. But in some ways, it's also, yeah, it's pushed upon, or yeah, kind of forced upon into the culture.
Hmm.
And then in other ways, it's also a defense mechanism, right? Just because maybe the culture is so predative or
Mm,
what have you. So it's just interesting how modesty can fall into these different categories.
yeah.
And yeah, somehow as a parent, we want to, I guess, take this just into the conversation bit
Hmm.
by bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you
It's
have any
hard. It's
practical points like how
yeah.
to do that?
That's
Like, because
a fair question.
you know, my like I have a preteen, and the thing is, like, I already feel like because I grew up in Asia in my teenage years, and I had a pretty, it felt pretty strict, like my parents' dress code, let's say. And so I feel I give my kids, a lot of freedom. But at the same time, I feel like it is just important to talk about that, we do need to be careful about how we dress. And when we go shopping, it's just something that I just want kind of in the back of their minds, like it's yeah, let's just keep the shorts like not too short.
Right. Like you don't want your
um,
butt out.
right.
Yeah.
Because fashion these days is a bit
Yes.
extreme. And so it's like I want my kids to have fun, the way they dress and express themselves.
True.
But at the same time, yeah, there's this other aspect. Okay, like we don't buy every fashion trend because, yeah, we want to be remembered by our character and not by how much skin we were showing. But yeah, if you have any like I don't know, conversation starters or practical advice, that would be really great. I think for all the
Hmm.
parents listening.
I think I have three, maybe 4 points on that. First of all, I appreciate the question because so many even podcasts or groups of people talk about this very, superficially or very like flyover. They just skim the surface. And most podcasts are skimming the surface, but you have to get to the practical point. How do you actually live this out in this situation with our kids in this circumstance? And so I appreciate the question. So one point I would give is A, you have to enter the space like you're already suggesting. You already have these conversations with your kids. You already want to. So you have to, if you don't even have the desire, pray for that desire as a way to model Christ and to disciple your kids well. You can't just ignore clothing and modesty and how our kids live our lives, right? And this is a part of it. It's a piece of it. So A or point one, I guess, is to have desire to enter the conversations and then actually walk into them, right? Two, which relates to your conversation about or your example of shopping. Two is use opportunities. So maybe you are shopping, but don't let that be the only time you talk about modesty. Put it in other contexts. So um, maybe you see a big ad, like a picture of commercialized something as you're going to school. Well, you ask your kids, what do they notice about that? What is the ad trying to do? There's a popular phrase, sex sells, and that's still what most products are trying to utilize to sell is sex. And so actually asking your kids what they think about it, what is that, how is that product honoring the woman or the man involved, the commercial, etc. Just to see where their head is at around these things, how much they're realizing or understanding, maybe what their friends are um, influencing them on. And this will help you get into your kids' headspace a little bit and see where they're at. So, two is to use practical opportunities, which is my general advice really for anything related to sexual health education. Use what's around you and your experiences. Don't just ignore or avoid it or hope that they didn't see it. Ask them about it. And then, three, in regards to modesty, would be to really talk about character. Like you're saying, like, what type of legacy do you want to leave? That's a word I use a lot, legacy. What do you want people to know about you and your character and who you are? Oh, and let's say you're raising your kids in the faith, right? I want them to know who Jesus is and who God is. So precious, so sweet. Yes. How do we do that? Like, what are multiple ways we can do that? And naturally, I think out of that conversation comes how you live your life and what you're showing off to people. In your earlier example, is that child by bragging about what they did and being a big show off and being like, look at me, look at me. Is that Christ like? No. Why not? Is this how Jesus lived his life? No. And so getting at character development, my friend who I mentioned earlier, her idea of modesty was like her most forefront idea of modesty was parading in front of her dad with her various swimsuits from the mall and asking which one was appropriate, right? That when she thinks of modesty, it's still at 37 is what comes to mind. And
Mm.
that's not what I want my kids' first thought to be about modesty. I really do want it to be about their heart and their character and how its connection to humility and the way we live our life. And so I think my last point would really be to just make sure you can talk about clothing and how you want to show off or not show off your body and the importance of covering up private parts and safety, um, how different cultures live this out, whatever. But the main thing you want kids to really know as they're raised is not just lengths of things and skirts and shirts, kind of like you were in your family, but it's more just the heart and the development of their character as they're growing. So ideally, I think you want kids to think about both things. And that can be an important part of the conversation if you make it so.
Yeah, that's really good to mention. Like, yeah, to find those teachable moments, especially
Hmm.
when it's not yet like a critical or sensitive moment. Like, shopping could
Good.
be
Yeah.
not the best time to bring it up for the first time. Yeah, but to really find ways to talk about it. Yeah, thanks for mentioning, like, if you see adverts or who knows, maybe posters or TV adverts, that could probably be a good chance to just bring up, like, hey, what do you think? What do you think about this? And yeah, like, what would be your yeah, kind of not idol, but example that you look up to, someone who really dresses well, or chic, or just makes a good presentable picture of themselves,
Hmm.
compared to this or that advert.
Mm.
So yeah, yeah, that's
Yes.
really good advice.
Yeah, I'm thankful for there are, and you can ask your kids this too. This can be for parents to ask their kids, but who do you think models this really well? Like who in our community, in our church, in popular media, influencer, Christian influencer, when you think about modesty, like who does this really well? And then ask them why. Are your kids just thinking about clothes because you've only had the conversations in the mall and so that's okay, well they're shopping so that's what they connect it to, or do they recognize it as being other parts of that person's life and how are they living it out? So I'm amazed at how much kids observe and how much they know even as at young ages. And so I always recommend that parents utilize opportunities so that they can get to know their kids in that way and have their eyes open to something new that might be developing in their kid's brain or taking root in their heart, even.
Hmm. And I think it also is just an important point to consider that as parents, we are examples, right? So, of course, they look at how we dress,
Hmm.
and yeah, and how we present ourselves. Yeah, it can either be a good example, or it might also be like, oh, I don't want to be like that at all. But yeah, it's just, I think, important as parents that we also remember to love ourselves, respect ourselves, and yeah, to make that show up also in the world.
Hmm.
What we wish for our kids, we should wish for ourselves as well. Yeah, yeah. So I feel, yeah, the ultimate goal is really just to honor ourselves, And yeah, I mean, there we do want to look good, you know. I think so. I don't know, do you have anything to say like with that desire to just look good? Because sometimes you know, we might be aware, especially as women, I think, if we want to look good, but then we know, oh, if I'm going to be at this place, that might just not work out so well. Even if you're dressing modestly, you're covering all the things, but you still know in certain places that, yeah, even if you are being modest to a certain standard, um, you're still kind of vulnerable, I guess.
I think in terms of looking good and encouraging your kids to delve into, creative outlets or how they present themselves in a way that is modest, you can point to influences like, well, who do you like? And in terms of their appearances and the way they dress, I guess. Who do you like in that way and why? Like who do you respect at school? Why? Okay, how can we emulate that a little bit? Or so I would think of really just practical people around you. Whose fashion do they like? Why? People at school or in church and their community and their family. And then also, I guess yeah, I guess I would really think about what is the ultimate goal for us. You mentioned honoring ourselves. Like, what are we living our life for? Not to make it too big, but what's the purpose of all of this? What's the purpose of clothes? It is to have fun and enjoy and show a little bit of your personality. And um, everybody has different discernment on that, as we mentioned, and different ideas about what looks good. But if something is like I even think about in middle school, what was really popular was like really, they were called like low riders, super low pants that every time you sat, you would be like pulling up the back of your pants the whole time. I even just think about comfort. Like, why was I doing that to myself to make sure that my underwear wasn't showing? Meanwhile, some other people didn't care that their underwear was showing, boys and girls. They wanted it to show, I think, or didn't mind. But like I even think about just what's most comfortable to be in and really lets you be you and not always like, think about how many dresses I've had that are just like I'm always pulling up because they're strapless or like they don't fit right. Um, so honoring ourselves in that capacity, but also considering from a higher mentality, what else does this reflect about me and the world I'm living in, and how am I adding to that or taking it away?
Hmm.
I have no
Yeah.
idea if that answers your question, but I'd be curious to hear like your
Yeah.
thoughts on your own question too.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. I mean, I think it's also sort of an internal thing sometimes, because yeah, I mean, we present ourselves as well as we can, tick all the boxes, you know,
Mm,
but other people aren't always in their true state, you know, like some people are, their eyes are wandering or, you know, looking around a bit more than necessary. And I don't know, I think it's just so valuable to stay strong internally and just make clear with our whole vibe and actions what our intentions
yeah.
are. Yeah, and to just really see, other than my partner, everyone else as a brother and treat them like that,
Mm,
you know,
hmm.
and you know, to just really send this vibe. And then I feel like people get it when you make it so clear.
Right.
I'm saying this as a woman. I think as a young girl, it could be different. Yeah, especially with you know dealing with different aged people. But I think it is something that I do want to just pass on to my kids, that they just stay strong inside and keep up this clarity. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Great.
Actually, I wanted to also go a little bit into, you know, because this is such a big topic for so many girls and women. But yeah, what if being modest isn't really the problem, but just really appreciating our own bodies is the problem, you know,
Hmm.
or the challenge, you know, because so many of us go through this tough comparison or just yeah, not really liking the body that we're
Mm,
in.
right. I think again, recognizing that as a norm, like oh, when I was a kid, I totally had this awkward stage, or let me show you this picture, or I felt so uncomfortable with this or that. So making sure that you're relatable in that way because it really humanizes you as a parent and shows that it's a normal reaction and response to going through puberty or being in a certain level of school or with a certain group of people. Um, and it's normalcy in growing up. There's always awkward stages and things you have to do as a kid in schooling, maybe that you don't want to really, but you like it's just a part of education, and then you feel awkward or uncomfortable about it. So just recognizing the difference between like, okay, this is normal part of growing up and trying new things and experiencing life, and this is when it's unsafe or it's not okay, or this group of people are maybe a people you don't really want to be around if that's all that they care about or something like that. So using really real life examples, but also relating to kids in that way is good. But I think if we try to really control like our girls in this and really make it a big fight, like that could be a difficult part of our relationship that we might need to consider again. Like, do we make it a fight? Do we make it this hey, like this is how it has to be my way or the highway, or you can't leave the house if that happens? Or do we have deeper conversations, ideally, about what's going on behind that? Why they want to dress like that, why they want to present themselves like that, why they want to wear that. Um, and I'm sure if I looked back at my own life, I would see seasons, like I think about university in particular, where I was in a group of girls and that there was just certain things that we wore and I'm like, ugh, that's kind of ridiculous. But like I'm not loved by God because of that or in grave sin, right? Like not able to come to Jesus. Um, and I wouldn't necessarily say I have even much guilt about that, but I kind of regret like putting that out there as something that I was appearing to be when I really wasn't. That really wasn't what I was most interested in was like my my physical attraction towards guys or how much skin I was showing. I really didn't want to be doing that. Um, if I was being true to self. So I think as much as we can, really honoring like the conversation around with our kids around, hey, what do you really want to show? And not just to show literally, but figuratively. And then how does that materialize in dress and appearance? So I think different seasons with girls and boys will present different challenges and opportunities around this. But it's not a one size fits all, literally. It's really not. Nor is it a one size fits all families. Um, there might still be people who think that their dad should be the end all be all for if a clothing item is modest or not. I find issue with that, but um, there's going to be different ways to approach this. But the main thing has to be the main thing, and if the main thing is their heart and what they're desiring and what they're searching for, then that's going to be the key conversation around um, their growth and their development and their spiritual maturation, all of it, um, because that's what's most important.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like you just hit on the nail because it's like we want to ultimately bond with our kids. And
Yeah.
if we can uncover the desire, like what is
Mhm.
it they really want? Yeah, then we can really bond and, support them.
Mm.
And yeah, maybe it isn't about the clothes in the end at all. Maybe it's really about something else. So
Mm.
yeah, yeah, I really like what you said.
It isn't about the clothes in the end, it's about something else.
Hmm.
It's good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so thank you so much. I think this was really great for parents to hear. Um, yeah, let's respect and honor our bodies and other bodies, which are all embodiments of God. I think that's what we
Yes.
want to tell our kids. You're an
Mm.
embodiment of God. So let's really represent that and be creative.
Yes.
um, yeah,
Yes.
I
I love
remember
that.
it makes, yeah, it makes me think of one of my kids when they were really young, she would really experiment. Like, I was almost hesitant to go out just because, she would put a shower cap on her head and
Oh,
then,
yeah.
I don't know, like wear really interesting things and then go out. And then I was just, yeah, like it was not easy for me. It was, early time of parenting and
Mhm.
I felt a little bit insecure, but I
Sure.
mean, way to go for her, right? Like to go
Yes.
out and just
Yes.
try that. Um, and later she
Yeah.
found cooler trends
Mhm.
that she made up herself, like sticking a feather in her hair. And
Nice.
yeah, I love that. And I think that's cool for us as parents and also for God to observe, us showing our creativity.
Mm.
So yeah.
I love that. I try to celebrate when I see little girls or boys out in like clearly whatever the heck they wanted that day. Like their parent just didn't even, they were like, not the battle I'm gonna fight. Like, let's go. We gotta go to the store. Yeah, I think it's so cute when I see kids out and about in, yeah, whatever styles. My daughter does totally the same thing. Like, even just inappropriate, not in a moral or religious kind of way, but she'll wear like a full dress to softball practice to play these sports. And I'm like, I mean, this isn't gonna be the easiest to run around. And she's like, I don't care. I'm gonna go. I want to go and I'm gonna show this dress. And I'm like, okay, great, let's go. Like you'll whatever. You're 6, at this point or 5. Like it's adorable. So, and a big sun
Yeah.
hat, and it's like, okay, that's fine. It's not gonna stay on when you run, but whatever. You'll figure that out. So, I think it's cute when they're little to just let them express themselves in that way, even if it doesn't totally make sense, and learn and they'll develop their own, style
Yeah.
as you say.
Yeah. Yeah, just one small memory from my past. Like, I remember I came to kindergarten the third time in a row wearing a dress, and then someone said to me, "Why do you always wear dresses?" And you know what? I stopped wearing them. And I think
Mm,
that's actually sad because, why dress down when you value yourself so much that you actually, you wear great stuff.
mm,
But unfortunately, I saw, oh, this is not normal. And then I
right.
changed myself.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's also just, I want to support my kids to, really every day is valuable, dress the way you really feel today. Yeah. So thanks so much, Kristen. It was really nice talking with you.
Yes, you too. Thank you for having me.
Spread the word and stay connected through YouTube, Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook, and our newsletter, which you can subscribe to on our website, schooloflove.org. Really hope to hear from you.